Hello everybody, welcome back to my studio. It has been a good while since I've made any YouTube videos, and I thought I would pop in today and show you what's been happening in my sketchbooks. So welcome to this little sketchbook tour. If you haven't seen any of my videos before, my name is Diane Mulligan and I am a teacher, artist, and writer from Central Massachusetts here in the Northeast US. So I haven't brought you a sketchbook tour since the fall of 2024. But it's not because I haven't been filling sketchbooks. In fact, in that time I have filled 2 big ones, 2 small ones, and done an awful lot of work in others that are either just private for me and I'm not going to show you, or that aren't done yet. So I've been making a lot of art, and yet I have felt a little resistance to making a sketchbook tour video. So I've been thinking a lot about why that is, where my resistance came from, because I like making these videos. I like making videos in general. I love sharing my art and talking about the process, and I love having conversations with you about that. So I was sort of stumped as to why I had managed to do all of this work and yet I wasn't sharing it. And I think what it boiled down to for me was expectations. The last time I shared with you a sketchbook tour in the fall of 2024, I was still in a fairly beginner mindset as an artist, which is great. I wish I could stay in a beginner mindset forever, to be honest with you. But when I made those sketchbook tours, I had so little expectation for my art. I wasn't expecting myself to do great things. I had a lot of room to make mistakes because I had no idea what I was doing, and I knew I didn't know what I was doing. And in the time since, I've stopped feeling like a beginner. I'm certainly not an expert, but I have a lot of experience now. I think of myself as an artist, and I even teach watercolor, which makes me feel like I should only show you things that are really good, even though I make a lot of bad things. So yeah, I hadn't felt like I had made enough progress or done enough wow, great art in my sketchbooks to show you. But as I reviewed these sketchbooks recently to try to, think through what was going on with me, I decided there's a lot of pretty good stuff in here. It's given me a lot to think about my own process and progress. And so let's take a look and let's see what I've been up to. So as I said, I have filled a bunch of sketchbooks in the past year and a half. And the first one, I think, of these, no, the first ones are these little Strathmore travel sketchbooks. So if you ever see these sketchbooks around, I highly recommend them. I picked them up at a local art supply store and they were on sale. It was like it was like they had them for Christmas and then they were clearing them out. They had 4. I bought all 4, 2 little ones and 2 big ones. It's 100% cotton paper. It's so light and easy to carry because it's soft cover, but it's still really sturdy. So highly recommend. And I used these last year for my travels, but also I did a 100-day project last year, which was to draw from life every day for 100 days. So a lot of what's in here are those sketches, including things where I had to, look out the window at the snow or just ran out in my backyard. And if you've watched some of my other videos, you've seen, I think, some of my sketches from New England Botanical Garden at Tower Hill. It's a favorite place of mine to go in the cold months and stay warm and do some flower sketches. This is another one looking out the window. So a lot of what I was doing during the 100-day project, I was working from life, but then I was also experimenting with different materials. So this sketch is done with an Inktense pencil and a water brush to move the Inktense around. The 100-day project, if you've never done one, I'm not doing it this year. I have done it the past 2 years, and it's such a great opportunity to just experiment. Right, just looking out the window of my house. The perspective here always confuses people. Our house is way up high on a hill, so our next door neighbors, we see their roofs. This one was a little experiment with gouache. It's probably the best gouache painting I've ever done. I'm not a fan of gouache. I have a whole video about it if you want to check it out. I'll put the link in the description box. And I met up with some artist friends at an ice cream place. We bought a sundae just to sketch it and had to sketch fast because it was melting really, really rapidly. It was a very unseasonably warm day. And one of my favorite magnolia trees in Worcester, which I have sketched I think this is last year was the third year in a row I've gone out and sat in a parking lot to sketch it. I might be getting closer to it. So a nice, small, light travel journal. And a great way to work on my 100-day project. And then this one covers the same basic time period, so March and April of last year. And conveniently, soft cover with this paper cover, I could write on it that I have sketches in here from Old Sturbridge Village, a trip to Las Vegas, Cape Cod, my house, and more Tower Hill. So this was a car sketch. I sat in my car and balanced everything to sketch this historic windmill, which is on Cape Cod here in Massachusetts. This is actually one of my favorite sketches I've probably done in the past year. I had bought a bouquet of tulips and they immediately flopped over. And it was cold, cruddy weather, but I really like the looseness of this sketch. It's kind of a departure for me from what I usually do, but it's also where I want to be style-wise. So I love that one. All right, now here's where we get to somewhere I feel like I was sort of failing, and that was, it was a warm day, so I went to Old Sturbridge Village, a historical museum, but then it was colder than I expected, and I couldn't really sketch outside much. I did this one really quick outside just using Inktense. And then I went inside the blacksmith shop and I did a really detailed drawing, and it became so tight, and that's a style I'm trying to move away from. And so sometimes when I do a sketch like this, I feel like I'm sort of reverting to old tendencies that I'm trying to shake off, and I get a little frustrated. You know, I want to be able to capture things in the way they feel in my imagination, and I'm not always there. But you know, there's some technical merit in the drawing, so I shouldn't maybe be too hard on myself. And sometimes in this one, when I was sketching in person, I didn't always have time to finish, and I never went back. It's a bad habit. But this is another one of my favorites from this sketchbook. It was another unseasonably warm day last April. The magnolias were in bloom. They bloom for all of 10 seconds here, and then they start to droop. And so after school, I drove up to Tower Hill. I literally stood amidst the branches and just sketched the flowers as I saw them. According to my note here, the day before we had 4 inches of snow, and then this day was perfect spring. I also really like this one. This was just with a water-soluble pen. I think it was just a cheap Stabilo water-soluble pen. In my backyard, way out at the edge of our property, we have this little, it's not a stone wall, but it's kind of like a barrier and some trees. And this one, I was just a week later at my sister's house in Las Vegas, and she has this beautiful blue agave in her yard. It was fun to play with different colors, unusual palette for me to paint desert colors. And since I was in Las Vegas and stayed up at a hotel that that had a view from like a lounge on a high up floor, had a view of the Las Vegas Strip, so had to do a little sketch of that. There were planes coming and going constantly because the airport was in between our hotel and the Strip. And this page is a highlight and favorite. This page was done by my nephew Reese. He saw me take out my art supplies and plunked down next to me to watch, and then I asked if he wanted to do a page and told him the only rule in this sketchbook was that we had to draw what we saw in front of us. So this is what he drew of our hotel and the landscaping and everything around the pool. And I absolutely love that. Also on that trip, I took my mom and her partner to the Hoover Dam, and they were kind enough to give me a few minutes to sketch while we waited for the tour. And then the obligatory leaving on a jet plane sketch here from the airport. And I did this one with Tombow markers and a water brush. And yeah, I really like how that one came out. And then back at home, my grape hyacinths. It's another kind of annual tradition for me to sit out in the grass and sketch these, some of the earliest flowers we get here. So I did a lot of good sketching last spring, and it's been really fun to take a look back and see my progress and play. All right, so once I had finished my little sketchbooks, I got to work on this one. This is a Hahnemühle 100% cotton sketchbook. These are my favorite type of sketchbook. They're my go-to. I love them. And most of what I filled this one very quickly because I was still doing that 100-day project. And so most of what I did in here are efforts toward that 100-day project. So my beautiful peonies in my yard. Did this one on Cape Cod. I was trying to kind of capture this little cove. And one of the fun supplies I started playing with last fall during my 100-day project were Pilot Parallel pens. So I did this sketch I was staying in Boston for a conference, and it was blazing hot out. It was too hot to be outside, but I had some free time, and I sat in the lobby of the hotel, which was up on several floors up actually, and I looked across the street at this Berkeley building and sketched it with a parallel pen. And that required some bravery on my part because I didn't use any pencil, and I just went straight in with this pen and a water brush to move around the ink. This one was an interior. This is a building on the campus where I teach, and I had hosted a little gathering for some of my colleagues down there and had a little bit of time after setting up. So I did this interior, and this was all using Inktense pencils and markers. So more experimentation. This was definitely a day in my 100-day project where I felt like I had no time. So this is a 15-minute sketch of peonies, no drawing first, just shapes, really loose washes, which is, not my favorite painting of peonies, but a super great exercise. Now this one I have really fond memories of sketching. I had just made myself this new viewfinder that I wanted to try out, and I have a video where I talk about the viewfinder. I can share the link for you. But it was drizzling when I set out, and by the time I got down to some buildings I might want to sketch, it was an absolute deluge. It was pouring down rain, and so I was able to stand under the porch of a building next to this one and look out and sketch this. This was at a camp where I was participating in a writing retreat and used some of the afternoon free time to sketch, but it was absolutely pouring. It was wild. But I still made a sketch out of it, and this one was using Tombow markers and Stabilo pens with a water brush. That's another one from that weekend. This is the end of the weekend, what's left of the bar. As I mentioned, I was doing my 100-day project. I had to get a sketch in, and this is what I got. So a lot of what's in this book are things like this, where I was doing the 100-day project and wasn't actually using watercolor. I was using all other tools. So this was another Stabilo pen. I'm actually really happy with this one with the perspective, and I feel like it's a pretty accurate depiction of my beater guitar. This will always be a favorite one. This was part of my 100-day project too, and this is my beautiful dog Amelia. And she passed away last fall. She was nearly 17. She was a really good girl, and I've done quite a few sketches of Amelia, but that's one of my favorites. Another annual tradition for me has become standing in my sunroom window and sketching the dogwood flowers right outside the window. And some unfinished pages, days when I just didn't really have time. I was playing so much. Through my 100-day project, I got really excited about working with ink, and I still am excited about that. It's just a really neat, different way of working than watercolor. Now these two I was trying to do some bike ride sketching. So I had my backpack of supplies on my bike, and I was going to do like a 20-mile bike ride and stop and sketch. The weather that day turned out to be pretty cold and unpleasant, and I had brought a super lightweight kit with just markers. I don't know, these pages are kind of a mess, but I have really fond memories of sketching them. I've been trying to get braver about doing people. So this was at an urban sketching meetup, and I was able to kind of watch this guy out of the corner of my eye. And then I did this sketch there as well, looking out onto the patio. And then I decided to just leave the people. I left it unfinished intentionally. I don't know if it works, but I had a lot of fun doing it. And every time I see these sketches where I've done umbrellas, I'm kind of proud of myself, because the first time I ever tried to do a patio umbrella, I think it took me about an hour to do one. And the end of my 100-day project here, which was sketching the roses in my yard with my Pilot Parallel pen. And this is actually in a mall, but they have these umbrella tables to make you feel like you're outside. Now these sketches I did on the last day of school last year. So I literally left school after final exams, and I was going to the Fitchburg Art Museum to drop off a painting for a regional show. And I stopped at the Fruitlands Museum. And what I did was I sat at a picnic table and I did 3 different views and dimensions of sketches of this house, which had been a house where Thoreau had briefly lived when Fruitlands was a sort of transcendental commune. And we're back to Cape Cod again. So these were some days when my hubby was doing some work for his dad around the house there on the Cape, and I snuck away and did a sketch at this historic grist mill and then the heritage museums. Some more Cape sketches. I'm typically quite afraid of sketching water, so I've been trying hard to practice. And actually, I'm really happy with both of these. I've got a sense of the reflections. It looks like water, I think. A little experimentation, trying to see how Neocolor crayons might work with my watercolors. And the same here, I was using ink, watercolor, and Neocolor 2s, just seeing, exploring some mixed media, which I have so much fun creating, although I don't always like the end result. This is another Boston sketch. So I don't fill my sketchbooks in order. You may have noticed that if you're an eagle-eyed person paying attention to the dates. I had a Boston one like way back here, June 24th, and then this sketch was May 22nd. So I don't do them in order. I just kind of randomly turn pages. But this was early in the morning before a conference I was attending. I got an iced coffee and sat out on the sidewalk and did a sketch of some of the buildings I could see from the little courtyard at our hotel. And I did this with Tombow markers and pen. Okay, and another experiment. My 100-day project was over, but the spirit of experimentation stayed with me. I had prepared this page with some random bits of brown paper stuck down on them. And then I went out and did some blind contours with a pen. I did a drawing with the parallel pen, water brush. I used Neo. I was basically throwing everything at this. And the values don't quite work out, but I don't know. I kind of like it. It's funky. This was another page I had prepared some random, I had stenciled some purple and yellow textures on here, and then went out and sketched my daylilies. And last summer I was doing the artist way, so this was an artist date sketch, as was this. If you haven't been to a Tate in Boston, I don't know what you're doing, but get out there. It's so good. And this one, I had spent a few days at a plein air event. I got juried in to participate in a plein air event, and I started off feeling great, and I really lost confidence as the event went on, to be honest. And by the time I got to the last day, I was just like kind of wrecked emotionally and physically. And I went down to the beach. I had finished the number of paintings I needed to complete for the plein air event. And I took just my sketchbook and a few supplies. I went and sat on a bench on the sand and just did this simple sketch just to get away from, again, expectations. And yeah, sometimes simplicity is the best way. And then I didn't use this sketchbook too much because I had been painting, doing a lot of plein air work on loose paper, but I went out to an arboretum in July where one of my friends works, and did a couple of sketches, still experimenting, playing with mixed media. And that was the last one that I did. So a lot of good learning in this sketchbook. And that brings me to this big sketchbook, which I just finished this month. And the sketchbook has traveled with me a bit. This is an Etcher limited edition perfect sketchbook with Arches paper. And I hate to admit it, I don't love this sketchbook. I actually found the full weight Arches paper to just be like too heavy for a sketchbook. I don't know. I had a lot of mixed feelings about the sketchbook, and I think that made it hard for me to want to fill it, to be honest. Maybe it's because it was so expensive. These are silly expensive, but well. All right, let's take a look. So the only rule in all the sketchbooks I've been showing you is everything in them had to be from life, even when my 100-day project was over. I don't make a lot of rules in my sketchbook usually. I basically have two kind of sketchbook paths. I have sketchbooks where I work from life, and then I have sketchbooks where I do from photographs and studio work. And this is probably my favorite one in this whole sketchbook. I was sitting at Old Sturbridge Village on a lovely bench in the shade and just capturing this kind of backyard view. But so anyway, as I was saying, I have these sketchbooks that I do from life, and then I have sketchbooks where I work in my studio or I just purely experiment. And that's generally, as I said, the only rule. If a sketchbook is from life, then everything in it is from life. This one, I was sitting at Elm Park in Worcester near my house. It had been a weird day where it was like on and off stormy. And anyway, I was sitting by this little like lagoon, and I was sketching and sketching very happily. And then at some point I realized that I was completely surrounded by Canada geese. Like 50 Canada geese had like wandered up to me, and they were just like staring at me. So that was fun. You see, I'm just not in love with the sketches in this book, even though they were good practice. Like this sketch, I don't like it, but it was good practice. Or this one, I was on the dock in the neighborhood where my in-laws live, and it's a tidal river. So there was current from the river, there was this little eddy, and I was trying really hard to figure out how do you convey all that moving water. I think this is the point in the sketchbook where I really start to get frustrated with myself and everything. We were out in Western Mass visiting to go to Mass MoCA and the Clark Institute, these fantastic museums in the Berkshires. And it was quite rainy, so I stood under the covered porch of our Airbnb and did this sketch, and it's just so tight and frustrating. So then I ended up doing it again, doing continuous line and really loose washes, and it's not really any better. I don't know. Sometimes I just get kind of uptight. But then in October, I went out with Urban Sketchers of Rhode Island to a historical house, the Varnum House Museum, and they had costumed interpreters there, including these women who are known as the Ladies of the Green. And I'm not going to lie, I think that's probably the best figure I've ever done. So I had a really good day that day. And I did these without any pencil drawings. I did blind contours on this page, which I don't know if it shows up on camera. But I studied what they looked like through blind contours, and then I painted them with no drawing. Right, this was I remember this day very vividly. A super hot summer day. A friend of ours has peach trees and invited us to pick peaches, and then I was just practicing a bunch of different ways I could paint or sketch peaches. Trees are hard. I don't know what to say except that trees are hard. I'm pretty much disappointed by every tree study in this book, so I'm not going to dwell. In the fall, I was in Peterborough, New Hampshire, and did this quick sketch here of the steeple of a building in the fall colors. This one was an experiment, again with, I think this is Inktense mostly. Another day at Old Sturbridge Village with another disappointing tree. And then we leap ahead to Christmas time. I visited my mom in Florida and did this beachy sketch. Kept it pretty simple, but this isn't the world's greatest sketch, but it took a lot of courage for me to sketch this water. So I give myself some props for that because water is scary. And some palm trees in the backyard there in Florida. And another day at the beach where I just sort of did some vignettes. So this guy who I could see sitting at his umbrella, the vegetation along the edge of the beach. It was quite fun to do, actually. And then we have more wintry sketches. So I slipped away to Tower Hill to get some tropical vibes on a day when my notes say it was 10 degrees Fahrenheit outside. That's below freezing in Celsius. And my sister gave us a beautiful amaryllis, so I did a little experimental sketch in ink. So this is all ink with a dip pen, and I chose to only color one blossom on each. And this was a rare February day. It was like 60 degrees, but there was loads of snow on the ground. So I stood on the side porch of my house and sketched our little path into the yard. And then we leap ahead again in time to April. I had prepared this page in advance with some purple and yellow Inktense. And I was up at Tower Hill once again, but it was warm enough to be outdoors. And I sketched the Temple of Peace. I really like how that came out. It was experimental, but a good experiment. All right, this one, I had a great day sketching the original engine for the historic Cog Railway on Mount Washington. It was February break. We were in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and it was so warm out that I was able to do much of this sketch standing outside. I was standing on snow. I was balancing my sketchbook on my arm, And I was so hot, I had to take my winter coat off, so that was delightful. And this is obviously a really complicated machine, and my sketch is all sorts of wacky proportions, but I think it has good energy. The way I did it was what I do whenever I am overwhelmed by a scene. You can kind of see the lines. I did blind contour drawings to warm up, and then I painted the big shapes without any drawing, and then I put ink on top and more watercolor. So I did all the big stuff standing outdoors, and then my arm hurt from holding everything, so I went inside to a table and looked out the window to finish it. Some more experiments, and I like to sometimes at the end of my sketchbooks put down what I have learned. So in this sketchbook, I have learned that when I'm experimenting with mixed media, sometimes things are going to go ugly, and I need to just give myself permission to make ugly paintings. I'm going to make ugly paintings whether I give myself permission or not, but it's a lot more pleasant if I have permission. I need to be patient because a lot of times in this sketchbook I wasn't giving enough drying time. I also chose to remind myself that an expensive sketchbook will not instantly make me a better artist. So this is an expensive sketchbook. It didn't change my art. My fourth reminder is to ditch the pencil to loosen up. And I've pointed out to you several where I didn't do pencil first, and they're my favorite sketches in this book. And the final reminder is to pay careful attention to the values in my paintings. So it's been a lot of sketching and a lot of learning for me over the past year and a half, but I'm excited with where my art journey is taking me. It's definitely taking me to more mixed media, more experimentation, and stay tuned to see where it goes next. So do you have favorite sketchbooks, tips, strategies, things you like to do in your art practice? I would love to hear about them. Share in the comments, and I will see you soon.